a couple more minutes, but we are just letting you know, keeping you updated that we'll be with you in a moment.
Please respect their headdress. And when this meeting starts, we are going to have some people up here doing presentations. And during the presentation, we ask that you no hands up and won't ask questions, because 2 minutes later, your question will probably be answered. If we didn't bring you here that you cannot ask a question, we will give you a question period. But it's a Saturday. We want everybody to come in, enjoy themselves, learn some stuff, but please let the presentators do their job. And we have some good guest speakers for you. It's going to take a while, so the less questions, the faster the meeting is going to go. But right now, before we start the meeting, I would like to have a moment of silence for the people from France, what they went through last night. But to kickstart the meeting, I would like to introduce our president, Sharon Buchanan, and Sharon is going to get us started today. And we have quite a list of people that are going to speak. And, try and retain your passion, and let's learn a little bit, and we'll be able to carry this fight forward.
Thank you, Ron. You're taller than I am, obviously. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out to talk to us. I do see the disadvantage of having moved my screen because I now cannot see what is on it. I know what's on it right now. I don't know what's going to be on it in a minute. So the first thing I'd like to do is introduce ourselves, and we are the Anglophone Rights Association of New Brunswick. And the first question that we get asked, are you anti-French or are you anti-bilingualism? And the answer is no, we're not. Okay? We're not anti-French, we're not anti anybody's rights. We believe that the current system is broken and that it needs to be fixed. We're not here to reinvent the wheel, but everything can be improved, and we think the wheel needs some spokes and some rubber. Okay. Jamie, you were just up here playing. What were you doing? I'm going to move to where I can see the screen. We had it back, and it was so small that you wouldn't be able to see it. That's why we moved this out here. So the Anglophone Rights Association was actually formed out of a concern of the obstacles, limitations, and barriers that are currently facing the Anglophone population of New Brunswick. We are aware of more than 40 associations in the province of New Brunswick right now. In fact, I think at last count there were 43 organizations or associations that represent the Francophone population of this province. But we are not currently aware of any other that represents the Anglophone population. And we want to be able to provide unified and collective voice to address our concerns with government, in the public, and basically to fight for balance in the application of language laws. We're not looking to remove laws, we're looking to balance those laws. Okay? The current state of affairs does not implement language laws in a fair and balanced manner. It drives unnecessary costs. It creates and escalates tensions that already exist between our two communities. We should be working to pull our communities together. We're not. We're fighting to pull them apart. And that needs to change. It places an unreasonable burden and sets unrealistic expectations on both citizens and business. It hinders the economic opportunity and growth of our province, and it's not sustainable. So let me ask you why you're here today. Does anyone want to answer? Why are you here today?
Change.
Language fairness.
To support the fairness of change.
Because there is no wrong answer.
That's right.
If you're angry that this topic is even coming up, that's okay. If you're curious about who we are and what we stand for and what we represent, that's okay too. We've come together today to share some information. Hopefully everyone will learn something. And one piece of knowledge is one piece of power. So if you walk out of this room today with one thing that you didn't have walking into it, we consider this a success. Excuse me. So the statistics that I'm going to show you come from the 2011 Statistics Canada. That is the most recent statistics that are currently published. I realize that we're 2015 now. 5 years, not a whole lot has changed. Okay. And the first slide that I am going to show you shows 1969 compared to 2011. And in 1969, the percentage of the population of New Brunswick that were considered to be Francophone as their mother tongue was 32.4%. The percentage of Anglophones was 67.9%. 2011, it hasn't changed very much. The percentage of Francophones in the province is 32%. The percentage of Anglophones is 65.4%. What has changed is the number among both groups who are considered to be bilingual. Now think about, we've had more than 45 years of bilingualism. The percentage of Francophones who are considered to be bilingual right now stands at 71.9%. That's a pretty significant increase from the 48% in 1969. So they've done well. They've done very well. However, the percentage of Anglophones who are considered to be bilingual has changed from 12.4% to 15.9%. Less than 4% in 45 years. I realize that these screens are a little bit difficult to read, and that is why I'm going to give you the information that is on the screens. But this next slide shows the vitality of both the English and the French language between 1971 and 2011. And the vitality of the French language has decreased steadily. In 1971, it was 0.93. In 91, it was 0.92. Now in 2011, it's 0.9. The Anglophone population, or the use of English in the province of New Brunswick, fluctuated a little bit around 1991 to 1996. However, it has remained pretty consistent. In 1971, it was 1.05. 2011, it's 1.07. So there isn't really a lot of change. But despite everything that we have done in 45 years, the vitality of the French language is still diminishing. It isn't getting any better. And this slide just speaks to what I have already mentioned, which is the bilingualism rates in the province of New Brunswick. Among the Francophones, the rate of bilingualism is 71.9. Among the English, it is 15.9. and non-official languages, 15.3. So what does this tell us? And it pretty much tells us that the current system is not working. And that we need to recognize that. We need to be willing to change our course. There is no shame and nothing wrong with admitting that something isn't working and making changes. Change does not mean that you're admitting defeat or that you're giving up. It means that you recognize that we can do better. And we can do a whole heck of a lot better in New Brunswick than we're doing right now. So we have a number of concerns, and those concerns involve employment, advancement opportunities, health care, education, heritage and culture, and the cost of duality. So I'm going to start with employment. Did I just go past the slide that I wanted here? My little computer genius is looking at something here for me. Yes, okay, slide number 1. The first slide is just a sample that we took that we wanted to be able to show you. And it is the number of open job postings that were available through the government of New Brunswick on the date that we pulled them, which was August 12th of 2015. And out of 34 positions that were open and available, 20 of them were designated as bilingual positions. That's 59% of the open positions within the government. Seems a little bit unbalanced based on the population. And the second slide I've skipped twice now. But it was a slide demonstrating the number of closed positions, positions that had been filled between June 1st and August the 12th. There were 131 positions posted within the government of New Brunswick. These include civil service jobs as well. They're not all provincial government. And out of that 131 positions, 63, or 48%, were designated as bilingual positions. Okay. So on to this slide, which is the increasing requirement for bilingualism. I found this especially interesting. I don't know about you, but I found it especially interesting. Within the government of New Brunswick in 1978, 1 year after the Official Languages Act, official bilingualism fully came into play, because it was elected in 1969, but it was a progressive plan. It wasn't fully implemented until 1977. In 1978, the number of positions within the civil service that were mandated as bilingualism were 24.7%. In 2000, it was 35.3. In 2012, it was 42.5. And by 2013, it's 42.8. So it's going up and up and up and up. And I don't see an end in sight. This is just a comparison between the provinces. Now, New Brunswick is the only official province. It stands to reason we're going to have a higher mandate for bilingualism in New Brunswick than we are anywhere else. It just makes sense. However, the positions within the core public administration that are mandated bilingual in New Brunswick is 53.6. In Quebec, It's only 67.5. Just to give you a rough idea. And I know some of you are going to ask, how does this affect us on the Miramichi? I don't think it's any big secret that the Miramichi has been struggling. It's been struggling for a little while now. And that's unfortunate because it's a beautiful and vital area. And we're not looking to, unfortunately, solve all of your problems. We can't do that for you, but we're looking to give you some information and some options that will help you. Does anyone know what the demographics of the Miramichi region are right now? Can anyone tell me what the Francophone population is in Miramichi?
8.1%.
8.1%. And of that, how many do you think function primarily in French at home as well? In 2011, 94.7% of the population spoke only English most often at home. 3.6% spoke only French, and 0.7% spoke a non-official language. So for less than 4% of the population, if you go on to the government job bank right now, and these numbers were pulled and put together Thursday evening, so these are updated numbers. 14 of 58 positions that are available within 58 kilometers, or I'm sorry, within 50 kilometers of Miramichi, 14 of 58 current job postings are bilingual required. Not one of them is a government position. These are private sector jobs. Okay? And for anyone who's interested, I did bring a copy of every one of those job postings that you're welcome to look at and verify my information. One of those positions does involve a form of health care, so it is a home care worker to enter the client's homes and work with the clients, primarily housekeeping, but there is some personal and health care involved. So, okay, you might be able to justify bilingual depending on who the client is. The other 13 positions are a grocery store clerk, a woman's clothing salesperson in a store. There are 5 postings for automotive salespeople. There is a posting for an assistant manager at the Circle K. You've got only 8.1% of your population who does not speak English. And you're excluding the 88.7% of your population who do not speak French from being employed. Jobs are tough up here. Well, jobs are tough everywhere, never mind up here. Jobs are tough everywhere. But how much tougher is it when you're excluding 90% of your population and telling them you're not eligible for employment? Education is something that we're concerned about. I don't know how many of you follow the news on a regular basis. If you do, you've probably seen the numbers. New Brunswick graduated less than 300 high school students last year who met certification requirements for bilingualism. Less than 300 in the entire province. In fact, I believe it was 296, to be specific. Now, Vice President Lucie Martin of the Francophone Teachers Association has publicly stated that as many as 90% of students arriving for day one of school in the Francophone school system cannot or can barely function in French. Yet, she claims that the Francophone school system graduates 90% of their graduates as officially bilingual. What is the Anglophone school system doing for our kids? We have declared ourselves a bilingual province. More than 40% of government jobs are mandated as bilingual, and as I've just shown you, many, many jobs in the private sector are designated as bilingual. Our kids are not being given the tools to become bilingual. What future are we providing for them? I don't know about you, but I want some answers to that. Okay. Another concern that we have is healthcare, and if you have watched, read, searched online, listened to the radio, in the past 20 years, you know that healthcare is a problem in this province. But in the past year, some of these headlines are going to look really familiar to you. New Brunswick doctors speak out on severe overcrowding in hospitals, calling it inhumane. I felt like I was on Main Street. Dumont patient spends 4 days in the hallway. And the interesting part of this article is in the middle of the page, and it's a statement by Dr. Dupuis. I've seen patients die in the hallways, he said, which really, that's the epitome of not having dignity. Okay. Chalmers Hospital chief surgeon frustrated by bed crunch. People ready for nursing homes or other care facility are using 25 to 27% of Horizon's hospital beds. Well, that's no difference in vitalities, okay? That affects both the French and the English. It's not an Anglophone specific situation, it's a New Brunswick situation. So we have hospital overcrowding. We have canceled surgeries. We have several hospitals, and these reports are available online, that have reports of poor maintenance and lack of cleanliness. We have a lack of nursing home and long care facilities. We have a definite lack of assistance and resources for mental health in this province. How many in this room have heard of Stephen Robbins? I see a few hands. Stephen Robbins was a gentleman in the Fredericton area who had reached the end of his rope. He was struggling, he was hurting, and he went to the hospital for help. And he told them, I need you. I am going to hurt myself. I need help. He spent 6 days in hallways, fracture rooms, and kitchenettes because they didn't have room for him. He even had to meet with a psychiatrist in the hallway of the hospital. And on day 6, he had had enough, and he checked himself out of the hospital, and his body was found in the river 2 weeks later. That's not an English problem. That's a New Brunswick problem. There are 50,000 people in the province of New Brunswick right now who do not have access to a doctor. We've seen the closure and reduced hours of rural emergency rooms and clinics. We've seen a reduction of ambulances to small communities. So knowing all of this, what would you say if it were possible to save between $40 and $60 million by merging our two healthcare authorities? Okay. How much improvement to our current state of healthcare could we gain with $40 to $60 million?
A lot.
Well, guess what? Right now we operate two health authorities. Both of them operate bilingually, by the way. If you walk in as a patient, whether you walk into a Horizon facility or you walk into a Vitality facility, you have the right to obtain service in your language. The only difference between the two is that one is managed in English and one is managed in French. So we're paying dual salaries for, especially, you know, the CEOs that are running these authorities. We're paying dual sets of insurance. We're paying dual facilities in some locations. Some locations we have a need of 2 facilities. Some we don't, and we're paying for it. But during a recorded CBC political panel in May of 2015, and I'm not sure how many of you watched these, but they are absolutely amazing because you bring all 5 of New Brunswick's political parties together around a table and they talk about a topic. And you get to hear and see what they stand for. During this recorded political panel, Minister of Health Victor Boudreau was asked about the possibility of merging the two at a savings of between $40 and $60 million, and he said no. And the reason that he stated was because we respect linguistic rights in this province. Okay? I've read the Official Languages Act. I know that you have the right to service in either language. I haven't seen anything in the Official Languages Act that says we have to have duplicate administrations and duplicate facilities. Okay. And previous, in September of 2014, the former Minister of Finance, Blaine Higgs, was asked the same question: why can't we merge our 2 health care authorities? And he responded, we could, but it would be political suicide because we would lose the Francophone vote.
Oh, poor baby.
Okay. Heritage and culture. Heritage and culture. First of all, I don't know about you, but my heritage and culture, they're who I am. They're in here. They're a part of me. They're the way I was raised. They're the beliefs that I hold. They're the family values that I have. They're not what somebody tells me that they're supposed to be. Okay? However, heritage and culture are funded at both the provincial and the federal level based on minority population. So the Francophone communities can go out and they can apply for funding and grants for their festivals, their celebrations, their sporting events, their music. Those same opportunities are not available to the Anglophone community because we're not the minority. So a really good example of how this is impacting us occurred in St. John this year. St. John is another community with a very, very low Francophone population. It's less than 3%.
It's actually 1.5.
Thank you. I'm being generous. However, in St. John this year, there was a huge, huge Acadia Day celebration. There were no Loyalist Day celebrations in St. John. It was non-existent. I have absolutely no problem with anybody celebrating their heritage. None whatsoever. I don't understand why it isn't available to all of us, for one thing. And for another thing, I don't understand why we're paying out that huge amount of money to promote those celebrations in a community that doesn't have a Francophone population. So in a couple of minutes, I actually have on my agenda for the first of our guest speakers, there's only 2 more things I want to touch on, but I was so busy talking with people when I came in. Okay, I didn't see my guest speaker come in, so I wanted to make sure that she was here. Before I turn it over to her, I have 2 issues that I'm sure you're all heard about. School buses. School buses. The Minister of Education is currently going to court in an effort to protect the separation of children on school buses according to language. Now, there are communities where there is a high enough population of students that this makes sense. You know, really, there are communities where it makes sense. There's a lot of areas where it doesn't make sense. And this forced separation has led to some rural routes being run by a full-size bus, traveling as much as 50 kilometers each way, carrying only 2 to 3 students. Okay? And if that is not enough to make you boil, we know of at least one case. There may be more out there, we don't know, but we do know of one case where no French driver could be found locally. Therefore, one was hired to travel from Moncton to Fredericton and be housed in a hotel all week long to drive the school bus and then come home every weekend. Okay? So in these cases, we are paying for 2 buses, 2 drivers, 2 sets of insurance, 2 maintenance and repair bills, 2 tanks of fuel to travel the same route at less than half capacity on the bus. Does that make sense to you? No. Okay? We're looking to save, what is it now, $612 million in this province? I can give you some ideas of where to start. And realistically, who are we hurting? Does it hurt our kids to talk together? Does it hurt them to ride together? Okay.
They just might get along.
Now, there's something else that hasn't been making the news as often. And as far as I know, this one is not yet before the court, but a proposal has been made to put it before the court, and that is daycare. They want separate daycares for the French and for the English.
You want separate nursing homes too?
That one's on my list, don't worry, we'll get to that. Okay. So when it comes to daycares, first of all, you know, we're separating our kids. How are we ever going to improve the tensions between our 2 communities when we're teaching our kids to dislike each other and remain separate from each other? You're not, okay? We're not teaching them cooperation, we're not teaching them respect. I don't know what they think they're going to catch from one another. Because these same kids that, you know, can't ride the school bus together and can't go to daycare together, go out and play together after school, they join the same sporting teams, it's all there.
Yeah, we're going back.
But let me ask you a couple of questions here. There are currently supplements available from the government for low-income families who need assistance with childcare. Okay? If we take daycare and we put that under the education program, which is already a right that we're all entitled to, do we lose those childcare supplements? Because our children are not in daycare, they're at school. Okay? And school hours are very different from daycare hours. So these parents, what are they going to do with their children outside of school hours? They still have to work. Where are their children going to be? In a daycare that they have to pay for. I'm sorry, I don't see the rhyme or the reason or the logic here. I really don't. I really don't. So I have some other things for you, as well as some other guest speakers, but I'd like to bring up the first of our guest speakers, which is, I've gone too far on my slide. But that's okay, because I'm going to be shutting this down so that our next guest speaker can put her presentation up. And that is Millie Forrest, who is from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm sure you have all heard of them. And she's here to speak to us a little bit today about the costs of duality in New Brunswick. So let's give her a warm welcome. And just bear with us for 2 to 3 minutes while my daughter switches the presentation over here. See, kids have got to be good.